The gentlelady's time has expired.
Way over.
Chair will now recognize the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Smith.
I just want to clarify a couple of points. First of all, Ambassador Stevens had access to you.
Yes, he did.
In fact, as we were here, a former, I don't have the name in front of me, but an ambassador in Russia said that, he always had access to you, always had constant communication with you, never had your email address. Right. I would hope that ambassadors would have more direct, immediate lines of communication, and Ambassador Stevens certainly did, correct? Yes. And also, did Ambassador Stevens ever advocate either leaving Libya or abandoning Benghazi?
To the contrary, Congressman, he was a very strong advocate for staying in Libya, including in Benghazi.
And I think, what we've learned here is, well, nothing, frankly, that we didn't know already. The security situation in Libya was dangerous.
Did you personally review our security situation as the previous ARB required?
Right.
Without question. Would you say that Ambassador Stevens was unaware of any aspect of that?
No, I would not. I think he was very aware.
He knew the security situation in Libya quite well.
That's right.
And yet, and again, I want to be clear on this, in his communications with you, and he had many, even if he didn't have your email address, did he ever say, did he raise the security issue directly with you?
No, he did not.
Did you personally review our security situation as the previous ARB required?
And, in the day in question, obviously he chose to go to Benghazi. He, as you have described earlier, as, gosh, all across the world today, diplomats are weighing the risks and the benefits in a lot of dangerous places. And he had to do that. And he chose to go to Benghazi.
He did, and Congressman, ambassadors in the countries they are representing the United States in do not, as a practice, ask permission from the State Department to travel in the country where they are stationed.
Right. And as well, they should not. They need to be in charge of their country. I'll also point out, on the question of emails and which ones you've received and haven't received, unfortunately, the State Department, which has been spending an enormous amount of time producing documents for this committee, cannot produce thousands of emails at the drop of a hat. And the committee chose to prioritize, your emails, but also Ms. Aberdeen's emails, Cheryl Mills' emails, basically Sidney Blumenthal's emails to you. They chose to prioritize those emails over the others. So the State Department is trying to get this information, but it is a question of the priorities of the committee, which brings me to the last point I'll make, and I won't take the full 10 minutes here. There are a lot of accusations that have been made back and forth about things that have been said that were or were not true. I think the one thing that was said in this hearing that is clearly the farthest from the truth is that this is not a prosecution. If you listen to the other side, this is unquestionably exactly that.
Did you personally review our security situation as the previous ARB required?
A prosecution. I'd ask viewers to just go back and listen to Chairman Gowdy's questioning of you before the first break and tell me that that's not a prosecution.
Did you personally review our security situation as the previous ARB required?
And I think, again, I don't know if shame, embarrassment, whatever word you wish to choose, it shouldn't be a prosecution. We have the former Secretary of State here. We should be genuinely trying to inquire about how we can gather more information. Now, the only interesting facts that seem to be brought up are always referenced back to the ARB.
Did you personally review our security situation as the previous ARB required?
Which just points up the fact that the information that we need, and again, I really want to emphasize, this was a serious, serious matter for the United States. A loss of 4 Americans is something we need to take incredibly seriously and investigate, and we did. And the information that we found out, as you've pointed out, was not always flattering. And there was no question that mistakes were made, and we hopefully learned from them. And I think, what we've learned here is, nothing. But that was investigated. So what is the purpose of this committee? And, when you look at the emails they request, when you look at the questioning, The purpose of this committee is to prosecute you.
Did you personally review our security situation as the previous ARB required?
And there'll be time enough for that in the next year. And people will do it. We don't need to spend $4.7 million in 17 months to simply prosecute you. And all the questions about, look, the security situation was well known in Libya. The security situation in Pakistan is well known. I visited the embassy in Yemen in 2009, about a month after someone had shot a rocket-propelled grenade through the front door. The security situation there is incredibly serious, as well as it is in a whole lot of other places. And those are difficult decisions. But
did you personally review our security situation as the previous ARB required?
The effort here today seems to be that somehow you personally decided not to do your job in Libya.
Did you personally review our security situation as the previous ARB required?
Okay. You were apparently the advocate of the policy in Libya, apparently passionate about it, but not passionate enough to care about the security situation in Libya. Chris Stevens, incredibly passionate about Libya, wanted to make that country work. Now, it is proven very, very difficult. Do we want to go back to Muammar Gaddafi in charge? I don't think so. And just, sorry to make a policy point, as long as I have a few minutes, it's interesting to juxtapose Libya with Syria. Because, just as many of my Republican colleagues are ripping apart the Obama administration and all those involved for choosing to remove Gaddafi, they are ripping apart the Obama administration and all the current officials for choosing not to get involved in Syria.
What are you babbling about?
What that points up, frankly, is the difficulty of the job that you had. And I thank you for taking it. I'm not sure I would be so bold. It is a very, very dangerous world. Bad things are going to happen. And what we are witnessing today is if bad things happen, you will be dragged out over months and months and months in this partisan atmosphere. And
did you personally review our security situation as the previous ARB required?
And that is very, very unfortunate. This needed to be investigated. I mean, 9/11. We didn't investigate 9/11. 9/11 2001, just to specify, with the length and depth that we have chose to investigate this. So again, I come back to the central point, to the central problem with this committee. It is a prosecution. It is a partisan exercise. It is not trying to investigate and find out the truth. And again, we are now, do a little quick math here, 5 hours into it, count the break, maybe 4 hours into it. We have learned nothing substantively new. And I think, what we've learned here is, well, nothing about what happened in Benghazi. Very serious things happened. They were investigated. They were reported. Mistakes were made. They were reported. But this committee, in all that time and effort, has unearthed nothing. Instead, they want to prosecute you. And you rip apart your every word, your every email. 2 staffers 5 levels down from you who said something bad about you. I mean, my goodness, I hope I don't ever have to undergo that kind of scrutiny. I would not survive it, and I don't think many would. So, I hope in the hours that we have left to do this that we will try to circle back to learning something new, to figuring out how we can best strike that balance that you described of being present in the world, but also trying to keep our people safe.
Did you personally review our security situation as the previous ARB required?
Throughout the history of the country, my aunt was actually a Foreign Service officer way back when, and we have lost many diplomats, and she tells me about it all the time. It's a difficult balance. If we can get back to that, if we can learn something new about what happened in Benghazi, I think that might be helpful. But right now, this committee is not doing a service to the 4 people who died or their families, or to preventing any of these future incidents from happening.
Did you personally review our security situation as the previous ARB required?
So I thank you for your testimony. I thank you for your leadership and your willingness to do a very, very difficult job. And with that, I yield the remainder of my time to the ranking member, Mr. Cummings.
Madam Secretary, maybe an hour or so ago, we were talking about the diplomatic security folks on the night of the incident, and you look like it appeared that you wanted to say a little bit more about that and what they. Speaking of that, the incident, would you like to elaborate?
Well, thank you, Congressman. You know, I don't want anything that is said to me or about me to take away from the heroic efforts that the diplomatic security officers exhibited. The 5 men who were with Chris and Sean Smith risked their lives repeatedly and were themselves under grave threat.
And I think, you know, what we've learned here is, well, nothing.
I wanted to point out that even when we try to get it right, which we do try, sometimes there are unintended consequences, and there is an example out of this tragedy.
Did you personally review our security situation as the previous ARB required?
Coming out of previous assessments of attacks on facilities, we now have safe havens, safe rooms in facilities, particularly residences. The diplomatic security officers were able to get both Chris and Sean into that safe room. Of course, the idea behind the safe room, why security experts advocated for them, was to protect our civilians, our diplomats, from attacks like the one that was occurring. The attackers used diesel fuel to set the compound on fire. And the safe room was anything but safe. I'm sure the committee members know that neither Chris Stevens nor Sean Smith died from injuries directly inflicted by the attackers. They both died of smoke inhalation. And one of the recommendations in this ARB report is that when we have safe havens, we need to have equipment that will enable people that are safe within them to withstand what happened in Benghazi.
Did you personally review our security situation as the previous ARB required?
The lead diplomatic security officer who was with both the ambassador and Sean Smith endeavored to lead them to safety through a wall of black smoke. He wanted to get them out of the compound interior up to the roof where they could be out of the fire and also out of the attackers' assault. He himself nearly died of smoke inhalation. When he looked around to make sure that both Sean and Chris were with him, he couldn't find them. Rather than proceeding and saving himself, which would be a natural human instinct, he turned back into that black diesel smoke, desperately trying to find Chris and Sean. He did find Sean, and Sean had succumbed to smoke inhalation. And the diplomatic security officer managed to take Sean out of the building. He could not find Chris Stevens. One of the horrors of the hours after the attack was our failure to be able to find where the ambassador was. We hoped against hope that he had somehow gotten himself out of the compound and that he was alive somewhere, maybe in the back. And additional efforts by the diplomatic security officers and then eventually by the CIA reinforcements that arrived to find his body or to find him, hopefully, were unsuccessful. And they had to withdraw because of the continuing attack back to the CIA annex before we knew what had happened to the ambassador. We were desperate, and we were trying to call everybody we knew in Benghazi, in Libya, get additional help. What appears to have happened at some point later is that Libyans found Ambassador Stevens, and they carried him to the hospital in Benghazi. And Libyan doctors labored nearly 2 hours to try to resuscitate him. And I mention all of this because I want not just the committee members, but any viewers in the public to understand that this was the fog of war, that the diplomatic security officers and then later the CIA officers responded with heroism, professionalism, as they had been trained to do. We thought things would be safe once they took refuge in the CIA annex. And as we know, even though that was a highly fortified, much more secure facility than our diplomatic compound, and one that we had nothing to do with in the State Department, it turned out also to be a target for the militants, which is where the two CIA contractors, Mr. Woods and Mr. Doherty, died. But in looking at all of the information, the Accountability Review Board.
Did you personally review our security situation as the previous ARB required?
And particularly Admiral Mullen, who was focused on what happened, what the security personnel did that night, came out agreeing that they were heroic and they did all they could do to try to save their colleagues' lives.
Thank you.
Did you personally review our security situation as the previous ARB required? The gentleman yields back. Madam Secretary, I appreciate you going through their heroism. I really do. It's moving to hear from it, and frankly, it infuriates me to hear folks to my left who don't raise a single whisper about spending $50 million to train 5 ISIS fighters. But God forbid we spend 1/10 of that to give some answers to the family members sitting on the first row. So I appreciate you discussing their heroism while some of my colleagues discuss money.
Also developed evidence that the security culture of the State Department was generally lacking